This is the day you're going to meet people who actually went to heaven. Heaven is for real. We're going to talk about what it's like. I think it'll be exciting. You don't want to miss 1 minute of it. Well, in the news, the fractious House of Representatives has gotten a champion. His name is Paul Ryan, but Paul says, okay, if you want me, here are my conditions. You cannot have all this nonsense you've been doing. You've got to come together and support me, and if you won't do it, I'm not going to be Speaker. And I can't blame him in any way, shape, or form for that statement, because he cannot have 30 or 40 of his members running off and weakening his coalition. They've got to be together. Wendy?
Yeah, Ryan made that announcement after talking to his colleagues behind closed doors last night. But he says if Republicans don't accept his conditions, he'll be happy to stay where he is. Caitlin Burke has the story.
After weeks of pressure from Republican lawmakers, Paul Ryan will run to replace John Boehner as House Speaker.
And if I can truly be a unifying figure, then I will gladly serve.
Ryan says he'll only run if he's supported by all of the key groups within the GOP, including the hardline conservative House Freedom Caucus. That's the group considered responsible for Boehner's resignation. Among Ryan's other terms, a better balance between work and personal life.
I cannot and I will not give up my family time. I may not be on the road as often as previous speakers, but I pledge to try and make up for it with more time communicating our vision, our message.
Representative Daniel Webster of Florida is also running and has already been endorsed by the House Freedom Caucus. Still, members of the group say they're open to hearing what Ryan has to say. In the most recent NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, more than 6 in 10 Republican primary voters said they'd be comfortable with Ryan as Speaker. 68% of Tea Party backers and 67% of Republicans identifying themselves as very conservative agreed.
It is our duty to serve the people the way they deserve to be served. It is our duty to make the tough decisions this country needs to get our nation back on track. The challenges we face today are too difficult and too demanding to turn our backs and walk away.
Ryan has given fellow Republicans until Friday to express their support. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. Listen, we've got to get together. And, you know, one of the things that they also need to do in the Senate is to do away with the filibuster, except in very unique circumstances. Because the idea that you have to elect 60% now instead of a majority is just crazy. And in order to invoke cloture and all that procedural nonsense. So the Senate doesn't do anything, and the Democrats can stop everything the majority of Republicans want to do. That's got to stop. And they have to come and say, look, we're going to have a majority vote on certain procedural issues, and the majority is going to carry the day because that's the way that a democracy is supposed to work. And we're not going to allow a small coalition to derail us. And the Republicans are saying the same thing, or they should say the same thing. Look, you guys have got your point of view. There was a very cogent op-ed that quoted Ronald Reagan today in the Wall Street Journal, where Reagan said, look, I came in and these guys wanted 100% or nothing. And you can't do it that way. You've got to take certain gains, build on them, and then take more. But you cannot have it all at one time. And that's the way those hardline conservatives want it. And people have got to recognize that no legislative body is going to give them 100% of everything they want. It just can't happen. So it's a question of negotiation, it's a question of compromise, it's a question of working out details. And when that's done, then we'll move this country forward. It's got to be that way. Well, in other news, the deadly terrorists from ISIS are working to help the Palestinians in their brutal attacks against Israelis. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
Thanks, Pat. The radical Islamic group released a video encouraging Palestinians to step up the terror attacks against Israel, calling itself the only true representative of Islam. Islamic State also blasted the Palestinian leadership and even Hamas for compromising. And as Chris Mitchell reports, if ISIS had its way, it would be even more involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
The recent wave of terrorism in Israel shows signs of copying ISIS tactics, like their beheading videos. That's what Israeli Infrastructure Minister Yuval Steinitz told CBN News.
The fact that they are using knives, and coming to people's neck, people trying to cut them or to behead them, I'm confident that at least some of those terrorists were not just indoctrinated, but inspired also from ISIS.
The ISIS production shows Israelis being murdered in terror attacks, praying and crying and being buried. Some of the video is from security cameras of recent attacks. It urges Palestinians to use knives, explosives, and poison to kill Israelis. It also shows ISIS clips of murdering individuals. Former Israeli Shin Bet Secret Service official Lior Ackerman said ISIS doesn't exist here as an organization in the Palestinian areas, but they would if they could.
They are trying to take an advantage on what happens here. They will do any effort to send terrorists inside and to put a stamp that ISIS entered here.
Ackerman told CBN News that social media has paved the way.
I think that because of the social networks, the easy access to sites of ISIS abroad, every Palestinian who opens a computer can obviously go and say that he now belongs to ISIS, to learn what to do and to take further instructions to execute some terror attacks in Israel.
ISIS has been calling for the past year and a half at least for Western Muslims in particular to rise up and kind of become these one-man jihads.
Many of the Palestinians who are carrying out the recent terror attacks seem to be acting on their own. CBN News terrorism analyst Eric Steckelbeck says the lone wolf nature of the attackers is also a sign of the ISIS influence.
Now what we're seeing in Jerusalem, in Hebron, are Palestinians, basically an army of lone wolves carrying out just random, spur of the moment in some cases, stabbing and shooting and rock throwing and terror attacks.
Rioting Palestinians also set fire to the tomb of the biblical patriarch Joseph in Nablus. Palestinians have attacked holy sites for years, long before ISIS arose. And Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas condemned that attack. But Steckelbeck said it's just like what ISIS does.
They want to erase any signs of biblical history or Christianity or Judaism, the Old Testament, the New Testament. They want to erase them and eradicate them from the face of the earth and from the memory of the earth.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Syria's President Bashar Assad traveled to Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is the first known trip Assad has taken abroad since the start of Syria's civil war 4 years ago. The Syrian presidency's official Facebook page says the pair met to discuss the continuation of military operations against terrorism in Syria. Pat?
Well, this just shows that he's going to be the puppet of Putin, and Putin knows that. And he'll come and pay court. When he goes up to pay court to the Tsar up in Russia, he's bowing and scraping before Putin. And Putin knows it. And then he'll now have himself a puppet state from which he can conduct operations throughout the Middle East. It's a very dangerous thing, and we've let it happen. We just said, oh, well, we're not concerned. We don't have a strategy in Syria. John.
Pat, Iraqi leaders in Baghdad tell the U.S. Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff that they want to capitalize on their recent military successes against ISIS and improve military coordination between Iraq's various factions. According to General Joseph Dunford, the Iraqi Prime Minister and Minister of Defense agreed to talk with U.S. military leaders about selecting a single commander who can speak for all of the groups when coordinating with the U.S. and its allies. Dunford says the move will help Iraqi security forces work better with Sunni tribes and the Kurdish militia called the Peshmerga. Dunford also says in the military, the fundamental principle is that wherever two or more are gathered, one must be in charge. Well, the American Cancer Society has changed its guidelines on mammograms. Now it says women should start getting them at 45 instead of 40 and switch to every other year at 55. The advice is for women with an average risk of breast cancer. Doctors generally recommend more intensive screening for women with a higher risk of the disease. And experts say it's good for women to check with their own doctors about how often and when they should get tested. Pat?
We had a lady named Corey Servas, who was the wife of Bert Servas. They were the publishers, among other things, of the Saturday Evening Post, and a very successful businessman. And Corey was strong on breast cancer screening, and so she had what they call a mammobile, and it came in here, and she insisted that my wife have a mammogram, and she did, and lo and behold, they found some things in one of her breasts, and it was sort of precancerous, and then she had the lumpectomy and all that stuff, which was rather painful. But it turned out that the doctor recommended a mastectomy, and that was years and years and years ago, and there's been no cancer, and for that, we're very grateful. But when you see women that are dying from breast cancer, I mean, this thing is very important. So the Cancer Society is giving good guidelines, but ladies, it's something that, you know, you can also have breast reconstruction. You can have, you know, something removed, and you can have a plastic surgeon come in and do reconstructive surgery, which takes care of most of the problems that women face. It's a terrible thing, but I've got a wife who's been alive now for, I think it's 28 years ago or something. It's a long time ago.
And that is very good news, and that just is testimony to why it's important to do it.
It really is. I mean, if she hadn't done it, she wouldn't have known the thing was there. It could have spread, and who knows? You know, it's horrible what happens to people that have these conditions.
And it wasn't in her family, wasn't it?
Well, her mother had some problems, but she was quite older. I mean, she was like in her late 80s before that thing developed, but it really developed, and it was awful.
Yeah, you can't always go by whether it's been in your family
That's
either.
right. But
so,
she had enough to know that it was time. But I think Angelina Jolie got a little carried away. I mean, she had a double mastectomy, which is kind of
without any sign of it
without
yet.
any sign, just prophylactic. And I think who knows? I mean, people, they do what they want to do. But anyhow.
That was a lot.
Okay.
John, back to you.
Pat, Wendy, the death toll is now up to 47 in the Philippines from Typhoon Lando. The storm struck the island nation Sunday and brought days of heavy rain and flooding. But as Ephraim Graham reports, CBN International Disaster Relief is on the scene, offering support to those in need.
First, Typhoon Lando hit the Philippines, leaving behind a path of destruction. The Category 4 typhoon blew ashore in the Aurora province, forcing more than 65,000 villagers out of their homes.
We were already packing our stuff to evacuate, then the landslide fell on our house, so we ran away. It's very hard for us, especially my children. We lost everything, including our clothes. Even their things for school are gone. Everything is gone.
Now families face the threat of Lando's aftermath, Kapu. The tropical storm's record rainfall is causing area flooding and mudslides. But CBN International is providing for the immediate needs of families in the province.
In these towns, we want to be more strategic, not just relief, but we would want to help them rebuild their lives by giving livelihood programs. Even if the storm comes, it's only Jesus who can give them hope and who can rebuild their lives.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
And Pat, of course, we all pray for their safety and protection.
Well, we love the Filipino people. They've been so warm and welcoming to us over the years. That was the first country we went with the 700 Club on a daily program overseas. And we've had a marvelous relationship with the Filipinos. But we're there to help them, and I might add right now our disaster relief teams, they're having 5-day packs of food, they're having clean water, they're having medical teams, they're having all out there in that disaster to help those Philippine people. So again, if you want to have anything to do to assist, you can just call 1-800-759-0700, or you can send a contribution to the CBN International Disaster Relief Fund, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we help people who suffer, and it's a thrill to be able to have a dedicated strike force, if I can use that term, of doctors, of relief workers, of volunteers who would go into a city that's been hit by a tornado or a hurricane or a flood, or in this case, whatever the monsoon, they've got all kinds of names for them, typhoon, and we're there to help, and we're usually on the scene before anybody else. So you can participate on an ongoing basis, and we appreciate your help.